Hello everybody, this is Killian. I'm here at our factory in France. So today we're going to be going over all the elements, everything that you need to know when you're going to be installing our set on the Land Cruiser 100 series. So you'll find some similarities with the 80 series from Toyota, as well as the Lexus equivalent, of course, of those cars. So now let's go ahead and go over the tools, how the shock is built, and all the little details that will tell you more about your future shocks for your Land Cruiser. So just a quick note, the rear shocks on the 80 series are the same as the 100 series. So first, to get started, let's talk about the high pressure valve, which is on each and every single one of our shocks. This is going to be the weak point of the shock. You want to make sure that this is protected and you don't hit it against anything or break it, because that will lead to basically all the air coming out and the shock not working properly. When you get them, they're already filled with nitrogen, so there is no need to check the pressure or add air or remove air. It's simply bolt on. So on the Land Cruiser 100 series, the front and rear shock, apart from the length, have a very similar build. So as you can see on the top end, we're going to have our upper nut, which is a 24 millimeter nut, as well as 2 polyurethane bushings. So we have our upper nut and the 2 bushings right here. The top support is built out of a chromoly rod for the actual bolts, and out of 71-75 aluminum for the supports themselves. And then we use 60-82 aluminum going down for our tubes. So our lower supports on the 100 series have a uniball bearing, which looks a bit like this when it's in raw form. So they're installed inside of this. You have 2 spacers which are pressed on for the front and which are not pressed on for the rear. The rear comes in 3 little parts, so you have a small tube as well as 2 spacers which are going to basically mount onto the supports this way. So for the rear, we're going to reuse the OEM bolt, simply because Toyota really made it in a nice way. And then for the front, you're going to be provided with a bolt by Nimbus, which will fit nicely in here for the lower supports. So now let's move on to the tools you'll need for the install of your Nimbus. So we like to use impact wrench, which makes the process of removing tires and getting some nuts on fairly easier. Then you'll need a ratcheting wrench, and then 2 sockets, 17 millimeter, as well as a 22 millimeter. Then we use a 24 millimeter flat box wrench. I like to have the ratcheting one because it makes it a lot easier to get that upper nut on for the supports. And then we use a 22 millimeter. That's going to be for the lower support of our front shock. Helps us hold it in place while we ratchet the other side. Okay, so now let's get to the first step of our install. We're going to take our shock, insert it towards the bottom, and then go back up into that support hole. So once you're there, you're going to go ahead, grab your polyurethane bushing, insert it on your upper supports, get the upper spacer, do the same, and then once that's on, you can start threading your 24 millimeter nut on that upper support, as you can see right here. So you're going to have polyurethane on the bottom, polyurethane on top, your spacer, and your nuts. Make sure that your valve is facing towards you. That prevents it from turning and hitting the sides or anything of the sorts. Okay, so for the upper support, we're going to use the 24 millimeter ratcheting box wrench. We're going to go ahead and get to that upper nut and go ahead and tighten it until you've got 2 threads showing. So as you can see right here, we've got the 2 threads showing. Everything is installed and in place, and we're ready to go. We can go ahead and mount the wheel back on, and we're good to go for the front. So now we can get to the second part of the install, which is getting that lower bolt in. So you're gonna go ahead and place your shock inside that lower support on the lower control arm, and then get the bolts furnished with the kit. Inside of that support hole, you wanna go from the front towards the rear, and then your nut is gonna go on the back side. Now that that's done, we can go ahead and thread this in all the way. So what I like to do is get the flat box wrench here to hold this nut in place, and then use the impact driver to go ahead and drive this bolt in. Once that's done, we're gonna get to the upper support, and then we'll go ahead and torque it to spec. So for the torque setting of the lower support, we're gonna set it at 74 pound-feet of torque, or about 100 Newton meters. We're gonna go ahead and grab our flat box wrench again, set it in place, and we're all set. Okay, so the first step for the rear is going to grab that 45mm piece of tubing and go ahead and slide it onto that lower support. It's already been done in this case. Then you can grab the larger spacer, slide that onto that support, and now we can get to the shock installation. So we're gonna slide it behind the chassis, between the sway bar and the spindle, and then go up and focus on that lower support. We're gonna go ahead and slide that ball joint in. If you're struggling a bit, feel free to grab a rubber mallet and just help it nice and easy in there. Once that's in, you can go ahead and grab that smaller spacer, place that onto that support. And now you can grab your bolt and throw it all together. We'll get to the torque spec in a minute, but first let's get it just snug so we can focus on that upper support of the shock. So for the upper support in the rear, it's going to be a bit trickier. We can't see much here on camera, but as you can see, we have the polyurethane right here in the upper support. We're going to slide it into the hole that's made for that purpose inside the chassis. And then your polyurethane bushing, as well as your spacer and your 24mm nuts are going to come on the other side of that support. So you're not going to see the next step here, but basically what you're going to do, you're going to insert everything on the other side and go ahead and tighten it until 2 threads are showing. The best way to determine if 2 threads are showing is going to be by feel, simply because it's going to be hard to get your head up and around either the exhaust or the gas tank for the next step. So for this last step, we're going to be torquing to spec. So in this case, the lower bolt is going to be torqued to 80 Newton meters or 60 pound-feet of torque. So we can go ahead and torque this. Also, one last thing to make sure is that the end on Nimbus shocks is always going to be facing towards the exterior. So towards you when you install it, whether that be on the Defender, on the 80 series, on 100 series, on a Grenadier, that end is always going to be facing towards you. Okay, so this 100 series, just like a lot of Lexuses and some generation of Land Cruisers, was equipped with the OEM hydraulic system, so the AHC, which has those spheres that we can see. as well as a very small and weak spring for the rear. And the torsion bars in the front are very thin. So since this is a vehicle that's not going to be doing any off-roading, it's only going to be used for comfort, we've changed the rear springs for some EFS springs. And then we kept the stock for torsion bars, which we've basically torqued down a lot more. So we only have 9 threads left until full compression of those torsion bars. So the end result is going to be a vehicle that sits pretty flat. So one thing to note is that when you lift the rear of the vehicle, since it's an IFS, so individual front suspension, you can't lift the front as much, and you have to keep a certain angle for the axles in the front. So there's 2 ways to go about it. Either if you keep somewhat of a stock height, you can keep it as is, or you can add a drop kit, which is going to drop that front differential and decrease that angle in the front axles. You can also upgrade the torsion bars, which is going to give you a stiffer front spring, but that's only in a case where you're going to be doing a lot of off-roading with a lot of weight. This vehicle is at stock weight and is only going to have 1 passenger to 2 passengers, so we can keep it with the OEM torsion bars from the AHC. Another thing to note is that with the AHC, if you don't remove the whole system and you don't remove the fuses that are assigned to that system, you're going to get a lot of error codes. So for the fuses, you're going to find 2 of them in your fuse box under the hood, and then 2 other ones in your fuse box inside the car. So make sure you remove those while the battery is unplugged, and then you can plug the battery back in, and you're not going to have any error codes, any ABS codes, or anything of the sort. Thank you so much. Have a great day.